Hello everybody, I'm LLCoolBrap and welcome to Prompted, the official podcast for the writing prompt section of reddit.com, where you are prompted to write stories. And here, we showcase the best of them, all with the goal of helping each other to become better writers. Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 17 of Prompted. We have a slightly longer runtime today because in addition to our stories, we have a bonus segment. We're being joined by MN Brian from the Writing Prompt subreddit, who will be giving some tips on how to improve your writing. Our theme for today's episode is road trips, more specifically, the road less travelled. Our first story of the day will be read by Giglomesh. The prompt was originally posted by Lumpser, and the story was written by Lordnequam. The title is Time freezes as death approaches and offers the soon-to-be departed a chance to pick someone within reach to take their place. On a road trip, your family's car froze.
"Do you do this for everyone?" I asked, face pale, eyes not leaving the image frozen in the windshield. "No," the figure perched like a black-winged vulture on the hood admitted, words clearly audible despite the intervening wall of glass between us. "Only in special cases." "And what are the terms?" It was queer that I did not find myself doubting the hunched mass of black cloth and white bone. Is that what madness was like? Where the visions assailed you and each new one only increased your confidence in their reality? Surely I was in the grasp of some lunatic delusion, but I listened anyway, and I believed every word as truth. "You can die, or you can reach out from where you sit and touch any other human being and they will die in your place. You cannot affect the world in any other way, and when I depart, with you or with another, no one who remains behind will have any memory of what has transpired." What am I even dying of? "Sudden massive heart attack," Death said, his shoulders shrugging a little in apology. "You spend too much time worrying at work, Henry. It's bad for your health." To one side of the car, a sheer wall of stone rose as the mountain's face climbed up into the evening mist. On the other side, the yawning drop down across the mountain's face, coated with a deceptively serene blanket of trees. "So, you just come down here to make the devil's deal?" I was fighting back tears now. Beside me, Marlene had her purse in her lap, and she was fishing for something in it. Probably her gum. She'd been drinking coffee to try and stay awake, but she hated the taste, and was always quick to try and overpower it with sweets after finishing her cup. In the back seat, George had his nose almost pressed against the screen of his phone, either texting one of his friends back home, or playing a game of some sort. The reception was too bad out here for him to be browsing the internet. The twins were napping next to him, their hands clasped as they always did when the pair were relaxed. "Most people would be thankful for the chance." It seemed a little hurt when it spoke. "The chance to save at least something." And in my hand, the steering wheel.
I'll be reading the second story of the day. The prompt was posted by datnat32, and the response was written by alewifePete. The prompt is two people running away from a blind arranged marriage, in which one is supposed to marry the other, meet on the road and fall in love with each other. When he walked out of the store, she was sitting in the back of his truck crying. "Ma'am?" Fred said tentatively. "Is something wrong?" Well, that was a dumb thing to ask. She shook her head and covered her face with her hands, crying harder. Fred looked down at the bag of chips in his hands. "Want to have a contest? They say no one can eat just one of these." The last sob sounded more like a laugh when she peeked through her fingers. He ripped open the top of the bag of chips and held it out to her. When she took it, he released the tailgate latch and eased onto the flat metal surface. Close enough to be near her, but far enough not to be threatening. She looked young, with wavy blonde hair and big brown eyes rimmed with red from crying. "Thanks." She stared at him for a moment and reached into the bag. He watched her crunching on a salt and vinegar chip. Then she reached into the bag for another. He was going to tease her about taking more than one, but didn't. "Have you been hitchhiking?" he asked gently. This wasn't the best area to hitchhike, but considering his own desperation to get away, he could understand why someone might do it. She eyed him warily. "Yeah, I'm driving to Boise. I don't know if you're going that far." Her eyes widened. "That would be great. I have some money for gas." He slid off the tailgate and smiled. "No need, I'm going there anyway." He offered her his hand and she put the bag of chips down, allowing him to help her. Her palm was soft against his. She seemed so young, probably about the same age as the girl his mother had arranged for him to marry. That had been the biggest shock when they read Mama's will. He had been pledged to marry to settle a debt. Who did that anymore? He should be given a choice. Hell, she should have a choice too. So, he'd run out about the time she was due to arrive in Spokane, wanting both of them to have a future they chose, not the one they're being forced into. He was going to do his best to avoid Miss Clara Fortuné. Her father had basically sold her and didn't tell her about it. Clara closed her eyes and put her head back on the seat. She had gone from anger to grief to fear so many times. When they'd boarded the bus, he calmly told her they were going to Spokane because she was getting married to a man she didn't know. The only thing she knew was that he was 12 years older than she, and his name was Fred. Then, at the first stop, she'd run off the bus with only the money in her pocket and her cell phone. Dad had been calling non-stop since then, and she refused to answer. "I have some soda in the cooler behind if you're thirsty." The kind man had been polite and kept his distance. "If you're going in there, grab me a 7-Up. She wasn't thirsty, but she got a can out for him and popped the top before setting it into the cup holder between them. He thanked her and glanced over. He had stunning blue eyes with tiny laugh lines in the corners. "This is really nice of you," she replied. "I just didn't know where I was going. Boise seems like it's as good a place as any." Her phone buzzed again, vibrating on the dashboard. She ignored it. "Do your parents know where you are?" "No." He frowned. "Are you running away to travel with a band?" She shook her head. "Not unless you're playing a musical instrument." He laughed, and it made her shoulders relax. This was the type of guy she wanted, not some faceless stranger named Fred. He turned on the radio and they talked about music. He talked about his dream of starting a ranch to rehabilitate horses. She talked about her goal of going to college to become a large animal vet. The sun went down and he drove until they were an hour outside of Boise. "I'm sorry, I just can't drive anymore. I can get us 2 rooms at the motel I just saw a sign for." God, he was so sweet. A perfect gentleman. They pulled off into the parking lot and he shut off the engine. "I'll be right back." She fiddled with the latch on the glove compartment and the door popped open, the vehicle registration falling out along with a pile of napkins. As she stuffed them back in, she noticed the truck belonged to Fred Douglas. He tapped on the window and she shoved the glove compartment closed. She swallowed hard as he opened the door. Her heart raced. It couldn't be. "You're Fred." He nodded. "That's what I go by." He offered her a keycard and kept the other in his hand. "I'm Clara." He paused, and then a slow smile broke across his face. What a coincidence. Now I'm going to hand things over to M. and Brian from the Writing Prompt subreddit for his segment on how to improve your writing.
Hello everybody, my name is M. and Brian. Today you're listening to the Prompted podcast. Particularly the topic on hand is the road less traveled. I thought it was fitting to discuss, when we're discussing the road less traveled, just the plights of being a writer. I mean, writing really is, as a whole, being a writer is really a road less traveled. It is not something that everybody does. It is quite the accomplishment for anybody to say that they have completed so much as a short story, let alone a novel, a number of poems. Things like that are not things that most people can do. So writing really is, in that way, kind of unique. So who am I, and why am I blathering on? Well, first and foremost, Katie invited me to come to the podcast to help writers, really, to just share some expertise with you and get some impressions for how I could help writers here on the Prompted podcast. So I've got a couple of writing credentials as far as Reddit is concerned. I'm actually a mod over at R.Writing. I'm also a mod at R.Writing Prompts, which is part of how I met Katie in the first place. As a writer, I've actually completed 3 novels now at this point in time. I'm working on a 4th. I've also written numerous short stories, written a number of prompts on writing prompts as well, and actually I work for a literary agent as well, professionally. So that is my side job, I will call it for the moment. I do have another job that pays a little bit more that also helps me pay the bills, because most people who work in writing are not doing it for the money, let me tell you that. So, if you don't know what a literary agent is, let me just briefly tell you that as well. A literary agent is really somebody you get connected to in order to sell novels. So particularly, you're really going to be seeking one if you actually write a completed work of fiction. Nonfiction works a little bit differently. Usually you have to be a professional in a specific field in order to go through that process of finding a literary agent for nonfiction. But for fiction, you finish a book, and once you are done with that book, you go through this process called querying, where you are pitching agents. And the reason you want an agent is because often publishers do not actually accept unsolicited manuscripts, that is, manuscripts from just writers like you and I. They need to actually see that manuscript come from a trusted source, and that is exactly why literary agents are around. They are the trusted source. They have their ear to the ground. They have lots of connections with editors at, big 5 publishing houses like Penguin Random House or Macmillan or places like that can actually get your book, on shelves in your big box bookstore locally. Barnes & Noble is what I normally see. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit off track here. The real point of why I'm here is because when I started writing, I struggled a lot with finding good information. It was very difficult to get in touch with good information. I mean, you can do Google searches for it all day long, but I didn't know any of this stuff about what literary agents were, what they did. I didn't know anything about, the difference between self-publishing, traditional publishing. I didn't know anything about how to go about this whole process, and it's been really enlightening to go through this job. So really, I just want to give back to the community of writers on writing prompts and elsewhere. So if you've seen me on Reddit, feel free to reach out at any time. I'm always happy to answer any questions that you might have. Anyway, so I did have a brief foray into self-publishing too, and that really did kind of change my perspective on certain things, but I'm getting off track completely here. So the road less traveled, let's go back to that. So I'd like to read you a post that I've written, actually, a little bit about this concept of being a writer and the ups and the downs that we continually go through. So I'm going to read that for you right now, and then we will talk a little bit more after that. It's time to celebrate. You have finally arrived. You are a successful writer. You cross the finish line and you are set to go forever. No more hard work. Instead, you can just focus on your muse, on writing, on the things that you love most. The moment is different for everybody, but we all experience some degree of it. Maybe you found an agent who's as excited about your manuscript as you are. Or you got an offer on a manuscript from a well-known press. Maybe you finally see your book on a shelf. Maybe you schedule an interview with NPR. Or you won a contest and the promise of an agent seems imminent. You hit a sales goal and now you've sold 10,000 books. Maybe you just hit publish in your first self-published book. Or maybe you just penned the last line of your first ever rough draft or short story. The moment varies for every writer, but the feeling is the same. Now do yourself a favor and kill that feeling and bury it in the backyard. I had a back and forth with a writer on a post on Reddit. He had hit it big. He was a bestseller in Australia, he got an agent, he secured a wonderful publishing deal with the promises of fame and fortune and beach houses on private islands. He had arrived until he hadn't. His post focused on his experiences, stating to writers to be wary. And my response focused on how there is no arrived in writing, or in anything for that matter, because the thing we often fail to realize is the company we keep. There's something in music known as a buy-on. If you know the right people or the right booking agents, you can buy on to a tour with a big deal band that's playing sold-out shows. The booking agent likes this because it's guaranteed cash. The dollar amount is easily in the many thousands, no doubt often even higher. And the funny thing about a buy-on is that how difficult it really is. You see, in your head, as a band who's paying $20,000 to play 13 shows in 13 cities, you think you're buying a lot of things. You think you're buying clout. Now everybody will treat you differently because you toured with this big band. You think you're buying fans because you'll be playing sold-out shows, right? And because all those fans are going to be clamoring for your latest t-shirt design and your new record after they see you play. But you aren't buying any of that. What you're really buying is something extremely difficult. You're buying a single 30-minute slot to make the best impression possible on a group of music lovers. And then you get the further opportunity to compete with bands who are more secure and much better than you for a single $20 that each high schooler or college student has in their wallet and brought specifically to buy the headlining band's t-shirt instead of yours. You must wrestle this $20 from them. You must get them to like you more than the band they came to see. Or you must hope that they already own all of the merch from all of the bands they came to see instead and want to give you money. You don't get that clout that you hoped for. You don't get a screaming and eager audience. You get an audience filled with skepticism who wonders who the heck you are and what you're doing invading their stage and wasting their time. You get whispers and quips and scoffs. You get scraps. A chance to play the game and fight for your life. See, this is the problem with thinking that you've arrived. You fail to see the company you keep, to see rationally the situation that you're in now that everything has occurred. Consider this for a moment. When you get an agent, you have properly distinguished yourself from every person who does not have an agent, and thrust yourself into a very large and very new pool of people who do have an agent. It's nice, to look back at that unagented pool and think, ha, take that, I am better. At least until you look around at the pool that you've put yourself in. Now all those people who write those amazing books that got you into writing in the first place, they're in your pool now. And when you get a book on the shelf, when you publish something, when you sell something, it's easy to look at those who haven't and scoff. It's easy to look back and think, ha, now comes the clout, the respect. Everybody, everyone, has to know how great I am now, right? But now you are a single spine on a long shelf in a large bookstore. Now you are in a very different pool with very different sharks. Now you are fighting a very different sort of battle to rise above the fray. Do you see what I'm getting at here? The problem isn't setting good goals and achieving them. The problem is overemphasizing them into thinking that they are more than they really are. You need to celebrate your successes. You need to be excited about them. But if you want to become a successful anything, author, musician, artist, businesswoman, postal employee, dog walker, whatever, you simply cannot nurture a feeling of arrival, of stagnancy, of contentment, It'd be as ridiculous as running a marathon and seeing the finish line while in first place and then stopping to admire the trees and laugh at everybody behind you. If you'd like to be a writer who is successful at writing, you need to recognize your greatest enemy. It isn't self-doubt that'll kill you. Self-doubt is normal and healthy and part of the process. It's contentment. It's the feeling that if you just cross that next ridge, you'll have finally arrived. And it's the weight of the ton of bricks that hits you when you realize you didn't pave the way to success. You just jumped from one crowded pool of writers trying to tackle their fears and write a book. And you've entered a new pool of writers who have all done that and are now selling those works that they battled to get out of them. Stop thinking that there isn't arrived. Don't allow yourself to think it. That's what will kill your writing more than anything else. It takes the fight right out of you. It makes you flounder and pause and feel safe. And writing isn't safe. It's base jumping. It's cliff diving. It's swimming in a pool with sharks. So what I really want for Prompted as a whole, for this podcast, and what I want to do with all of you here, is really to answer your questions more than anything else. I do a lot of writing on the craft of writing, on how publishing works, and that to me is my passion. That is the thing that I want and desire to help people with most. Whether it's writing books or short stories, whether it's just writing better characters or better plots, that is exactly what I'm here for. So if you want to submit a question to us here at Prompted, questions, and I'd love to start answering them and talking about them and just giving you my opinions on those subjects. So go ahead and send an email to promptedfeedback@gmail.com. So that's promptedfeedback@gmail.com. And then starting with the next Prompted episode, I will go through and answer some of those questions. Maybe just spend a whole entire segment on one, or maybe answer a couple of them at a time, depending on what we get. But that is exactly it. That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm excited to do. Thank you all for listening to the Prompted podcast. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to connecting with you all in the comments and in the emails that come in.
Hello everyone, this is Katie. It's very late here and I have to be kind of quiet, and I'm not on my normal recording setup, so I apologize for the audio. I just wanted to give a round of applause to Brian. Thank him for coming onto the show and giving us that perspective, that unique perspective that he has. I also wanted to add that on our subreddit, prompted.reddit.com, we will have a post for all of your questions as well as that Gmail account. So you don't have to, if you don't feel like it, send us an email. You can also just post in our subreddit or anywhere that we might see it. I'm going to give it back to LLCoolBrap.
Thanks, Brian. Our third story of the day is being read by Katie, who also posted the prompt. The prompt response was written by FaultlessName. The story is called "And They All Reached Up Towards the Sky."
It had been hard for the colony, and that was putting it lightly. Shortly after arriving on the new planet, plague befell the people before they had time to even set up the first hydroponic farms. Earth plants had a hard time germinating in the foreign soil. Microbiologists soon found that this was because of competitive fungus-like species eating the seeds. It seemed Earth species in general had a hard time surviving on this harsh new world. However, while the planet that they had embarked 2 generations ago was hostile, the generation ship was not. Expedition leaders and officials were faced with a harrowing choice. The landed ship had enough life-supporting generation equipment on board to support but a fraction of the populace on the planet. Either all of the settlers were brought into the ship and the colony's progress brought to a grinding halt, or a portion of the survivors were boarded until a solution to the hard times could be found. The leaders of the colony chose the latter. High-ranking officials and leaders were brought aboard the ship. Leaders and officials with no experience in such matters. Leaders and officials that were the grandchildren of the professionals, successors to the successors. It was done in the dead of night, without the knowledge of the rest of the people, probably because they knew it would cause outrage. The doors were sealed, and the population separated. This meant that equipment on board that was built to assist the colony was barred from use. It was nearly 40 years ago that the privileged 100 were divorced from the 700 colonists. In a fenced-in yard, no bigger than a quarter acre, a young man could be seen raking mud across a platform of sorts. "Max, it's time for dinner!" Max looked back towards the adobe-style house and grinned. He hastily put the finishing touches on his work, evening out the corners, and ran to the house, throwing down his wooden rake. He opened the tightly wound thatched door, and the aroma hit him. It was a smell almost all the colonists knew well: vegetable stew. The inside of the home was small, almost quaint. In one corner stood a clay table, a rectangular object with no outstanding features, other than the two hollowed-out sides for footroom. 2 clay benches set on either hollow side of the table. At one bench, Max's younger brother, Zach, was seated, already enjoying his bowl of stew. Max turned to his mother, Eliza. She wore a gentle, weathered smile, the kind of smile that had seen horrors and travesty, and was simply grateful to have made it through. That's all the colonists did these days, just try to make it through. She handed her son the bowl of sustenance, and proceeded to pour herself one out of the handmade metal pot. When they arrived on the planet, one of the first things that could be noted was the red tint in the dirt, sometimes blood red. It was found that this was because of iron deposits in the soil. A lot of the iron went into weapons and armor for fighting off wildlife, but a sparing amount went to utensils. The 3 sat at the clay table and ate. "So, Max, how did it go today?" his mother asked in between sips. "It was good," he nodded. "The dirt was really good and the sun was out all day. I got almost 6 batches done." Max gestured to the large pile of bricks through the window. "That's great news," his mother beamed. "Isaac is going to be really happy with us." "Yeah," Zach chimed in. "I can already see him drafting new buildings for construction." "We don't need new buildings. We need a better wall," Max said, looking down at his already dwindling bowl of stew. "Did you hear about the mastodons yesterday?" Eliza looked across the table and shook her head no. "There's a new pack nearby," he continued. "They've taken an interest in the wall. That's what those noises were. Maybe they'll piss off like the last bunch." "I hope so. Mastodons are pretty hard to kill." Max looked at his spoonful of vegetables and broth. "Good meat, though." After dinner, Max went up on top of the house to look out over the colony. The sun was setting over the ship, and its shadow was stretching across the buildings, bringing with it the cool relief of the shade. The ship stood out like a mountain over the colony. The wall arched around and met up with its Goliath hull. The town, composed almost entirely out of adobe-style buildings, cowered under the steel structure. roads ran like veins in between the buildings, with colonists still moving material around. The colony ran like clockwork at this point. Just the right amount of people assigned to each job to keep the place afloat. And now, for the first time in decades, the colony was growing. Isaac, the lead architect, is said to be drafting plans for a new section of the colony, which would bud out from the main section. Things were looking good. Max looked towards the center of the colony. A greenhouse. The only glass structure stood, shimmering in the dusk light. The greenhouse was protected fiercely atop its hill. While sand had been collected from a nearby river, it produced little glass after refining it. As a result, replacement panels for the greenhouse were scarce. The earth plants needed to be completely encased in the glass to prevent any of the spores from contaminating the soil. Edible plants had been produced, but yield little. It will be a couple of years before they produce cultivatable amounts of food, and so the colony depended greatly on the greenhouse. The main road led from the greenhouse, with all of the artisans' shops on it. The road led all the way to the ship's entrance, although the stairs leading up to the doorway had been overgrown and decayed. No one had walked up those stairs for a long time, longer than Max could remember. There had been a couple efforts to open the door, but to no avail. That was long before Max was born. Max breathed a sigh, looking past the wall to the fungus trees that loomed over it. The forest practically taunted him. Max wanted so badly to run out past the walls that he had been confined to his whole life, but he knew it was dangerous, and there was nothing out there for him. Just as he was about to head down, something caught his eye. A red light just above the sealed door of the ship. Max hurried down the ladder and ran as fast as he could to investigate, nearly knocking down several couriers in the streets. He rounded the corner at the greenhouse and kept going, only to stop at the foot of the stairs to the ship. "Maxim, wonderful to see you, boy." It was Isaac, walking towards him with his clay etching tablet. "How many bricks today?" Max ignored him, looking up to the door. He pointed up to it. "There," he painted. "There was a light right there." Isaac raised his eyebrows at the proposition. He looked up and squinted through his bushy gray eyebrows, but he saw what Max saw. No light. "Are you sure you've had enough to drink today?" Isaac asked, looking over to study him in concern. "No, I mean, yes, I've had enough. There was a light there." "Are you sure about that? Nothing stirred in that ship for decades. The old 100 probably died years ago." Isaac gazed upon the glimmering ship. "Too bad," he sighed. "We could have used so much in there." Isaac raised his tablet. "Anyways, about those slabs." 6 batches, about 30 slabs." "Excellent!" Isaac turned and walked back to his workshop, which they were just outside of. "You should get some rest, Max." Before the aged architect had time to walk 3 paces, a screeching metal sound could be heard. The door was opening. The door opened, fighting vines and other undergrowth to fully extend to the top of the stairs, revealing 3 figures. As they stepped forward, their age became apparent. In the middle stood the oldest of the 3, a man in a pristine white lab coat. His hands folded behind his back as he walked regally out onto the stairway. On either side of him stood armed guards. They were holding rifles. Max had heard about them, but had never seen them. They were locked away when the 100 sealed themselves inside. A 4th figure approached from behind, wheeling up some sort of apparatus on a cart. The fourth man reached down and grabbed a microphone, which he handed to the man in the middle before slinking back into the ship. People were already arriving to the base of the stairwell in droves before the man even spoke. His voice echoed across the colony and bounced off the walls. I see I have already grabbed your attention. His eyes scanned the growing crowd. Before I begin, I would like all of the remaining colonists to report to the base of the stairs. Remaining colonists. There had been great losses after the divorce. All of the older surviving colonists looked with disdain upon their comrade that had betrayed them. Hatred boiled in their hearts and spilled out through their steely glares. My name is Garrett We know who you are, traitor, shouted someone across the still growing crowd. Garrett looked down upon the malcontent with his old eyes. Michael, it's good to see you again. How's the wife? He tried to crack a smile, but it looked more like a wince. She's dead, you bastard. Go to hell. Slightly retracted, the man looked across the crowd once more. The pink light from the sunset shone onto both the angry faces of the elder colonists and the awestruck faces of the younger ones. The reason we've appeared today is not to agitate you, Michael, or anyone else. We come seeking your help. The crowd erupted into inaudible shouting. Garrett, sensing that he was losing control, looked over to one of his guards and nodded. In response, the guard raised his rifle and fired it into the sky. Loud cracks like lightning struck across the entire colony, and silence followed. The reason, he continued with a stern face, we need your help, is for a mission to further the prosperity of all of us. We need people, volunteers, for such a mission. The young and resilient produced by our... He stopped and glanced at the growing fury among the colonists. Your colony. What mission? Someone else shouted from somewhere closest to the stairs. It was Tommy, one of Max's close friends. Tommy was always curious, looking for new ways to do things and learning more about the planet that they were forced to live on. Once the volunteers are selected, they will be briefed aboard the ship. It would be in the interest of the mission that its details are not discussed with those not embarking. The crowd was quiet with reflection. So, Garrett started, will all colonists above 18 solar cycles and below 25 cycles please come to the front? Slowly, all of the younger colonists wandered in front of the older ones. Many of their parents had already died, but those who still had parents faced protest from them. Max took several steps to the front of the crowd and felt a firm hand grip on his shoulder. His mother stared at him with painful eyes. She pulled him close to her. Max, she whispered, these are bad men. I know, Max said, staring back into his mother's eyes. Even being born after the seal, he had witnessed the artifacts of their selfishness firsthand. But every day he had sat on top of his house, staring out across the fungus forest filled with God knows what. A forest outside the meager land that they had claimed for themselves. Now was his chance to help take some of the planet that had taken so much. He could feel it. But I trust them. His mother hugged him tight, and he could feel her tears on his arm. I'll be back. His mother nodded a painful nod, and he pushed his way to the front of the crowd. Garrett looked down across the crowd at the young colonists and smiled a weary smile. Now, he grinned, Can I have a show of hands for volunteers? And they all reached up towards the sky.
Giglomesh is up next with Blahgarfogar's response to Bridget Bain's prompt. When I was 16, my father pulled me out of school and shoved me in the car. His eyes didn't leave the road as he threw a gun in my lap and said, "We're going to get your mother." Hold on to your butts. This one's a doozy.
Everybody's running from something, sometimes from themselves, and when that happens, you call on someone very special, someone who stopped running long ago, the Highwayman. For a long while, folks thought he was a myth. No one knew his name or where he was from. He simply appears, materializing out of the dust storms in a rusted old speedster with a fire-breathing nitro-boosted engine to match. You'll hear him. You'll definitely hear him. Snarling down the rippling asphalt with a determined face. He'll be wearing a plain white dress shirt with a simple vest and tie, his sleeves rolled up and dark glasses to match the leather gloves covering his disfigured hands. He answers to no one, but helps everyone. Addicts, runaways, mobsters, the abused, the forgotten, the ones who wish to be forgotten. He does not discriminate. In the end, it doesn't matter. He'll come for you when you need him most, because nothing stops a highwayman. He'll get you to where you need to be. To threaten a highwayman is a sin. To kill a highwayman is impossible. You can try, but you will fail. Any man can die, but an idea, it is something more than a man. Don't bother listing off your sexual prowess or talking about your macho brooding attitude. In the Saffron Gentlemen's Club, only money talks. A man can do so much with wealth, it's almost absurd. I pass a bloke droning on and on about thematic symbolism about a book he's penned, shameless plugging in a strip club. Never thought I'd see the day. The woman wrapped lovingly around his lap takes it all in, his words, his demeanor, his smell, everything. But I can see her eyes glaze over. You could kill an epileptic by placing him in this club. Dazzling arrays of green and purple lights scatter across the hollering crowd. The strippers donning glow sticks around the parts that matter, the areas which tease your eyes and promise your mind pleasures you didn't know you had. The goddesses effortlessly slide up and down the fluorescent pole while saturated guitar leads wail in the background. Pulsing in and out of my skull is a steady and infectious bass line, each downbeat coinciding perfectly with the sway of hips. I maneuver my way through the sea of patrons who consist of wannabe womanizers, aristocrats, and shady rats I'm not too keen on meeting. I catch the attention of a brunette server clad in a bare bikini and ask her if she knows where Paige is. "Wait, you're not one of her new boyfriends, are you? Don't cause any trouble, or I'll break your wrists," she quickly snaps. I show her a pair of silver car keys and a silver coin of unknown origin. Oh, I can see on her face that she wants to apologize, but for some reason she holds it in. "Well, look to the stage, hon." And there she was, wearing nothing but a wristband, free as can be with all those men by the stage in the palm of her hand. They're all vulnerable, powerless against her smile, her charisma, her body, her motions, her scent. I don't care for it. I'm here for one reason only. At last her dance ends, and I follow her to her dressing room. She's sitting in front of a mirror with those light bulbs adorned around the frame. I make no effort to hide myself, even going as far to adjust my tie. "You're not supposed to be back here," said Paige in a sing-songy voice. "And you're supposed to be keeping a low profile," I respond. "I make good money here. Hey, at least I settled on a small town. Put some clothes on." She twirls her head around, reapplying her red lipstick. "Why? Am I distracting you?" I turn away. "Something took my wife." "Sorry to hear that." "No, you're not." "How's your daughter doing?" "Leave her out of this." "But you've brought her with you, haven't you?" "I need access to Echidna's map, and you're going to give it to me." "Why should I?" "I helped your coven, now you'll help me. I never ask anything in return, but now I need the map." "You helped my coven, not me. I don't know where it is." I grab her arm, not in a gentle manner, in a manner that lets her know the malice that I'm capable of. "Let go, Highwayman." "Give me what I need, then I will leave." "No one is supposed to use that map except for the coven. If I give it to you, then I may be forced to hurt you." Paige smiles deviously. Threatening a highwayman is a sin. "I've sinned plenty, mister, and no, I'm not giving it to you." Her skin starts to heat up, burning my palm. For a brief second her eyes glow a fantastic red. A blade to the neck solves everything. I let her limp body fall to the floor and rummage through her shelves. I hear the place going silent, aside from the music. The witches will find me soon enough. Then, behind the frame of an oil painting is a yellowed, tattered excuse for a map through the Deadlands. I shove it into my pocket. "I'm coming, Jane," I mutter. "You won't be alone for long." As I begin to leave, I'm struck by a silent broadhead. Pain surges up my shoulders. Her sisters have come. I bolt towards the exit as several more witches armed with bewitched crossbows take aim. I see now that the club is empty, besides a single woman in a long white coat sitting by the stage. "You've made a mistake, breaking into a coven club without my permission," spoke the woman, drinking a glass of wine. "Breaking rules is so uncharacteristic of a highwayman, "I'm not one anymore," I reply, tearing the arrow out of my arm. "I can arrange that." The witch teleports behind me and kicks me onto the table. Glass tears away my fragile skin. Get up, old man." I didn't have to. With a thunderous crash, the revelator barrels through the club's walls, flames erupting out from the skirt exhausts. The 8-cylinder engine growls and roars like a rabid animal unleashed. Luckily, my daughter can tame such a thing. She learns from the best. "Dad, get in!" shouts my daughter, firing a sawn-off shotgun. I run through the ensuing chaos and land on top of the roof. "Go, Alice! Go!" She stomps on the throttle, the tires vomiting out bits of shredded rubber and smoke. 550 horsepower and enough torque to reverse the rotation of the planet violently propels the muscle car out of the building, leaving the sisters with a nicely packed plume of dust and debris, but they're giving chase with 2 Harleys in hot pursuit. "Honey!" I shout above the burble of the engine. Crossbows smash into the boot of the vehicle. My daughter opens up the sunroof and tosses me a revolver. I take aim and miss the first 3 shots. "Keep it steady, Alice! Get on the pavement!" Below me, she shifts into 3rd gear, maneuvering the car around the wreckage of an airliner. "I'm trying!" Cursing, I fire off my last shots, blowing the tires off one of the motorcycles. Good riddance. The remaining witch is in the midst of reloading. "Alice! Gun!" Blood is starting to seep onto the windows. "Wait!" She's shuffling through the glove box while simultaneously weaving through the junkyard. I'm trying, Alice! Now! Honey! Gun! Gun! I'm reloading! The witch brings up her weapon to take aim, charging the arrow with sizzling arcane energy. Panic courses through my bloodstream. "Alice! Here!" I catch the rifle and squeeze the trigger. One flash. One bullet. One witch, whose skull is scattered all over the sands. I crawl my way into the passenger's seat and pat my daughter on the back. "You did good, honey. You did." Something insidious is looming in the rearview mirror, a titan of sand and rock, ascending into the dark moonlit clouds. "Dad? What's that? She asks, worry tinging her tone. "The beast, the guardian of the Deadlands." "How's our reserves?" $6 for the shotty, 2 rounds for the widow, and 2 Greek fire grenades." I swiftly reload the repeater. Keep your eyes on the road, and the pedal to the metal. You hear me, Alice?"
Yeah.
I hold her hand. "I know you're scared, but you can do this."
I know.
Breath, in and out. Remember what I said. Alice grabs the shift knob, which I fashioned out of an 8-ball. "Nothing stops a highwayman." I give her a smile and a quick peck on the cheek. "We're getting her back, I promise you." Through the infinite wall of dust and fire, we ride together into the horizon, the beast howling behind us. We've got some road to burn.
Our final story for today is being read by yours truly, LLCoolBrap. The prompt was posted by Jay Snippety, and the story was written by Da Halo Jedi. You're taking a road trip in a 5-seater car. Each seat is filled with you, but at various points in your life, one of you strikes up a conversation. Are we there yet? The youngest me, only 7 years old and positioned directly behind the driver's seat, kept kicking the teenager's chair, my chair, and asking that question. We'd been sitting in silence for a while, taking stock of the situation, save for him. His impatience slowly driving us all up the wall. I think I was starting to get really fed up with it. I could see it on my own face. The oldest me turned and yelled, "Listen you, if you don't shut it, I will turn this car around. Count on it." His wrinkled skin quivered, but his eyes were filled with a fierce light. He wouldn't be cowed easily. Years of experience, likely dealing with kids like me, had made sure of that. The 7-year-old finally stopped kicking the chair, going silent. He crossed his arms and puffed out his cheeks. He must have been seething on the inside. The teenager, barely 17 years old and only so familiar with driving, let out a sigh of relief and tried to strike up a conversation. "So you're all, me then? Okay, so do we need to talk about the future, or..." The 40-year-old sat next to me in the back seat spoke up, having quietly observed up until now. Isn't there a rule against that? Like, we can't talk about the future or we might end up with Mecha Hitler because we tried to change it? I'd prefer living in a Mecha Hitler-free world, thanks. Nice to know we still remain as eloquent as ever in the future, I told myself. Quite honestly, I'm as scared as you are that might happen. But if we're careful, couldn't we just become super rich or something, and not mess up the timeline? Like there's a chance we're gonna flashpoint this shit, but we could probably make do with tiny details. Who wins the next Super Bowl maybe? That's probably a good place to start. The adult uncomfortably shifted in his seat next to me. Fair point. But I actually don't think I can. I don't really remember anything too detailed before we got into this car. Same. The older man in the passenger seat chimed in. We've got nothing to do really, save reminisce on the past. Personally, I think we've had a life worth living. The adult spoke up. I don't have the same experience as you do, but I like our life. We're married, we've got a family, we have a career that we love. He noticed the teenager up front smiling and sighed. And yes, that does mean we get laid in the future, teen me. The teenager did a fist pump and immediately asked, "So guys, who's the lucky lady? Can I know? Maybe I need to look out for her." If she's who I think she is, you're not meeting her for at least a couple of years. I glanced over at the adult and the older man, and they gave me a nod and a wink respectively. At least I was sure who I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. "What? We get married? Cool!" The 7-year-old burst back into the conversation, startling the rest of us. "We get to be a good daddy like daddy, right?" The older man and the adult both looked solemn for a moment, before the older man finally, softly said, "Yes, we do." His voice was almost a whisper. I could see tears falling from the adult's eyes, and I didn't have to ask. This was something we all dreaded, even if we didn't know what it was yet. Then, as I contemplated just how it might have happened, a worried thought raced through my head. Wait a minute. There was a pause. Everyone in the car seemed to know what I was about to say. They were all staring expectantly. When did I get into the car? Where are we going? Simultaneously, the child, the teenager, the adult, and the older man threw me a faint, pitying smile. The older man, his voice calm and soothing, spoke. "We're going to meet Dad. He's waiting for us." "But Dad isn't... No, he isn't. Not yet. It looks like we're going to beat him to the finish line. Hey, who knows? Maybe Mom is waiting instead. Maybe she went ahead without all of us. Just like her, leaving us behind. We'll find out soon enough." It was only just then that I noticed that the road ahead of us didn't seem to have an end. It just kept going and going, stretching through a vast countryside into a bright horizon, brighter than any sun. I was shaking. This wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to be here. I mustered up as many scraps of voice as I could and croaked out the words I could find. "No, I'm not dying. I'm not dying today. There's more for me to do. There's people I need to talk to. I have to go back." The older man's expression changed again as the teenager slowed the car down. This time into a much wider smile, genuine and full. "You're lucky, you know. You get the chance to go back. A lot of people would kill for that. I think you know what you need to do now, and I doubt you'll forget it. So be sure to tell them all we said hi." The car came to a complete stop. As the engine idled, I climbed over myself and opened the back seat door. The window showed the fields and pastures, but a blinding whiteness was visible through the cracked open exit. I jumped out, and there was nothing but a white void, and then a flash. I could hear beeping. Everything was blurry, but I could make out that I was in a white room. Someone next to me was crying. As I shifted, I could feel pain in every ounce of my body. When they felt the covers move, the person pulled their head up. It was Barb. She had come as soon as she'd heard. Her makeup was ruined, her eyes were red and baggy, and she still looked as beautiful as the day I'd met her. She was blubbering and choking out the words to me, and even though the tube in my mouth kept me from speaking, I understood. They said there was an accident. They said you... At that moment, I could only think of two things. One, I needed to go and talk to my dad as soon as I could. No calls, no Skype. I needed to see him, let him know. Two, as dumb as it may sound, I felt the urge to watch football. I had to know who was a fan favourite for the next Super Bowl. That's all we've got time for on today's episode. We hope you enjoyed the ride. A big thank you to all of the writers involved in today's episode. We enjoyed reading each and every story. If you liked any of the stories featured today, the details for each author can be found at our website, prompted.reddit.com. As always, thanks for listening. Until next time, good words, good writing.